Right now, there are so many amazing new video games on the horizon, okay? Times have never been better for us gamers. And one that has slowly been teased over the last year is the new Fable, set to release in 2025.
I'm a hero. I should do what I want.
Oh, it's your life and death stuff. That's what defines you. Really stays with you.
Not only has it interested new fans to the franchise, but it's also managed to pull at the heartstrings of returning fans. The themes, the cheekiness of the trailers have captured what's always nestling at the heart of Fable: comedy. But the original games went way beyond that, delivering a delicious slice of RPG action at a time when most came in a turn-based format. The world of Fable reacted around you, and you were met with bright colours, fantasy adventures, and a cast of memorable characters. At the time, in 2004, most RPGs delivered deep and serious experiences that required focus, lots of reading, and careful decision-making where your choices would be laid in front of you, good or bad. But Fable split the atom, transitioning to third-person hack-and-slash combat while still remaining attached to the RPG tag.
In those days, you only had to make a game which you could shoot things, no matter what you shot, and it would pretty much well be successful.
What is a role-playing game? A role-playing game shouldn't be me being someone else's character. It should be me inside the world.
It broke the mold, spilled the tea, and was a video gaming cult success that essentially, with charm, choice, and combat, laid the groundwork for what we consider today an action RPG. Role-playing games have always been a niche of gaming, and back in the early 2000s, it was even more in its own category. RPGs were specific. They had to have dialogue choices with consequences. They usually involved having party members and characters to quest with, and the best of them were all isometric top-down adventures. Now, of course, there have been great third-person games since the early Zeldas, a game that loads of people would call an RPG based on today's standards at least, but in 2004 wasn't comparable to what games like Baldur's Gate, Planescape, and Fallout offered in terms of choice and consequence. They were considered essential to an RPG. Some games had started to blend the genres, like Diablo 2, essentially one of the first action RPGs that did away with a lot of choice and consequence and instead gave you the RPG leveling experience, but in a totally action-based format. Final Fantasy was delivering amazing storylines and worlds to explore, but you played from a pre-selected list of characters and there was no creating your own story. Morrowind had brought RPGs into a first-person 3D world where you could explore, quest, and level up and still have plenty of choice and interaction. But again, that was first-person and still based on a dice rolling system. I'm sure some of you played Gothic, a fantastic game, but one that pretty much plays out the same every time. And honestly, one of the reasons it took me months of walking past the Fable box on the shelf at GameStop to pick it up was because at one point I got massively distracted playing the first Pirates of the Caribbean game, which had zero to do with the movies but was an amazing open world RPG adventure. Think Mountain Blade but with more story. And of course you had the amazing BioWare RPGs around this time as well, Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire, but they were still all based on a D&D dice rolling system. At this point in gaming history, there'd been games like Rune.
Defeat me in combat, and your place among us as a warrior is assured.
But nothing really as ambitious as what a studio attempted in 2004.
AEP is in Guildford, England, and I am standing here with Peter Molyneux, and we're going to be talking now about Fable. The entire world wants to know about this game. Right.
Honestly, maybe the story of Lionhead Studios and the promises, lies, and broken dreams is just a title for a future video on this channel. I don't know, let me know, because it's a story that starts with Lionhead being one of the most watched studios after its creation and ends 20 years later with only one employee left who'd been there since it was first started.
He wants to revolutionise the industry with every single release.
He went and makes people think and sparks the imagination, and they say, can you really do that in a game?
We did everything Peter wanted. I think we'd probably be here for 10 years working on this game.
But despite all that, their very first game was a massive success.
The first game, Black and White, was really the foundation stone of what we wanted Lionhead to become. Some amazing technology, working with some incredible people.
What Peter has brought to the table in a lot of his games is sort of moral ambiguity.
We're your conscience. Good and evil. Yin and yang. Black and white.
It was a pretty nerve-wracking time releasing that game. You know, there was a lot behind it, but it was enormously successful.
They decided to create a video game that brought together so many things that we'd seen before, but deliver them all at once in a way that you're basically experiencing every time you pick up your favorite single-player game today. Fable had been massively hyped, but dropped in 2004 and greeted you with the sounds of music, adventure, and also danger.
Deep in the forest of Albion lay the small town of Oakvale.
At this point in just human storytelling, we've done the hero's journey to death at this point. Go look up the stages of it and you'll basically see it's a plot line to any of your favorite, well, whatever really. But Fable hands you the hero's journey on a plate right from the get-go, and it handles the whole thing with amazing grace. The reason everyone loves the way Fable starts is because it shows you immediately the world you're fighting for and what's at stake.
Hello, little brother. I hope you haven't forgotten what day it is, like you did last year.
You're catapulted from the idealistic world as a child and to a place far away that is just as strange and new to your character as it is to the player. You ever think of that one?
They're all dead. You don't want to join them, do you? Then give me your hand. I have a new student for you.
You don't look much like hero material to me, but Maze knows what he's doing, I suppose.
You explore as they do, learn the skills as they do, and are teased with the power of what's possible by the spectacle of the great heroes and other characters around you.
Shame you couldn't see me fight in the arena. You might have learned a thing or two.
Knowing what you're capable of is a powerful motivator for the player, and if you've ever seen the higher level version of yourself in a video game later, you probably know the feeling I'm talking about. One of the best things about the way Fable approached its design as well was the fact that everything was all off of one button. Combat was made incredibly simple, yet the variety of animations, timing and skill required meant that it was kind of endlessly fun.
People will be able to not find the ends of the combat. You'll always be able to get a little bit better. And that's just the melee or the sword combat. Then you've got the bow and arrow combat.
Something I think everyone loved about early Zelda as well was that your character actually aged as you played through the game, and Fable uses the opportunity to literally hold your hand and teach you like a child while you're still a child, and then as you get older inside the guild castle, the training gets tougher as more is expected from you. And then once you break beyond the quite literal walls of the tutorial, you are now allowed as a young adult out into the world, and it's yours to explore.
This is a young hero at the beginning of the game, where you start the first time you get your hand on the controller. This is the character that you will be playing along. And by the end of the game, you can possibly end up like this character.
At a time when loading screens were super common, Fable still managed to instance areas of their world map into small sections that could be carefully handcrafted, laid with traps and hand-placed enemies as well as hidden treasure. Call me crazy, but these days massive open world maps are great. Who doesn't like having an unending world to explore? But one thing to think about if you haven't, how often do you revisit an area in, say, The Witcher or Cyberpunk if you've already explored it? Once it's been cleared, most of the time, you never go back. Which means there are some really awesome locations that you're only ever going to see once. Because of the technology available in Fable, the world was isolated into sections that you had to travel back and forth between. And also a bit like Zelda, the developers then filled them with places you could return to, magical chests you couldn't open, or doors you could solve the riddle of. You are again kind of reminded on your journey through these areas of all of the treasure you're constantly progressing through the game so you can try and unlock. When something in the story had an impact on that part of the map, you had to deal with it every time you passed back through that area. Actually, if you had to tagline Fable, what their core message was, it was probably, we're going to show you how your character impacts this world. But in Fable, it wasn't just a choice with quests. It was things like your character title, what you named yourself. It would either make people laugh or cower in fear.
Listen, I've heard terrible stories stories told of him.
What clothes you wore and how you cut your hair would get a reaction from people.
Nice selection of face fungus you have there. But to be honest, I don't give two hoots what you look like. I just like making heroes like you look stupid.
Outside of The Sims, I don't think any other game has come close to what they wanted you to feel in Fable. Like, everything you did mattered. People could love you or spit on you.
Hey.
I'm afraid this woman is taken.
Or is it hot here?
One of the sort of basic ethoses of design of Fable was this idea that the main character changed how he looked depending on how you were playing that character.
Something else you got in Fable was an awesome leveling and experience system. There were so many different ways to mix and match what weapons you used with what spells you wanted, all with the goal of making a hero as mighty as one of those you'd seen in the first 30 minutes of playing the game, because kids need role models, right? Not only that, but leveling up your strength made you pack on muscle and look freaking stronger. Same thing with your dexterity skills, you get taller.
Basically, if you were to use a big sword, you'd get more muscle.
If you don't bother doing that, you'll get thinner. If you eat lots of pies, you'll get fatter.
I mean, San Andreas came out that year, and yeah, you could make CJ buff and you could make him fat. I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty cool. But it's just not comparable to the amount of different characters you could create in Fable for multiple playthroughs. Games like the first Witcher would follow on from this, offering their own combat system, but also a diversity in skill paths for your character to follow. I mean, this ultimately made Fable endlessly replayable, not just through the choices you could make within the story, but how you choose to treat the people around you. There's something to be said about the scale and size of modern RPGs, the giant open world maps that are sometimes fun to explore and sometimes honestly not. But within the downsized world of Fable, we got a bunch of other mechanics that still you don't really see very often. You could buy property, decorate it, own it for yourself, or put it on the market and make yourself a landlord. Set high tax rates and make everyone hate you, or give them the idealistic society free from the worries of life. If you liked a house someone else owned, it was pretty simple. You could kill them and just take it for yourself. But of course, people are going to think you're a bit of a dick. At a time when RPGs were only on PC, if you wanted to play one, you probably had to embrace the negative stereotypes behind the JRPG format, or experience a combat system that just wasn't that accessible to a wider audience.
I quite like turn-based stuff, but I think it somewhat breaks the illusion, and that is a big problem.
Fable broke through, giving gamers almost a new genre of game. There was a huge market of players who loved GTA, but absolutely wouldn't pick up Final Fantasy. But even Fable had a wanted system, where guards would continuously attack you, and it gave you the same sense of freedom that a game like GTA gave. But it's in an RPG world. Today it might feel like a given that your third-person game was going to give you a skill tree, an open world, choice within its story, but all of that combined to make Fable a groundbreaking moment in gaming history. And of course, it's just one of many of those moments. But there is a bit of a twist to this tale we should probably talk about. The team behind Fable is the now long-closed Lionhead Studios, fronted by a man named Peter Molyneux, which, depending on your gaming history knowledge, you might know as one of the most controversial developers of all time.
I came up with this really, really dumb idea. If we could sell floppy disks, on these floppy disks would be some free stuff. No one really wanted floppy disks with loads of stuff on there. If they wanted floppy disks, they wanted floppy disks that were blank. And what I found was that people were paying more attention to the software on these disks than anything else. 12 years old, I employed my sister and all her friends to cut people's lawns while I just sat there and watched. And I paid them about, a cent an hour and then collected $1.
In the lead up to the game's release, Peter made some seriously wild promises about what was possible in the game. That you could have children, that the game would span your character's entire lifetime, and that you could knock an acorn off a tree and slowly over the years in the game watch it grow.
So how has the game progressed? What are we looking at now?
Well, over the last year, we've been, trying to fulfill the promises that we set at last E3.
So they're AI characters that will beat you to the tasks if you don't get to them?
You could be down in the bottom of a town and one of the townsfolk says, can you rescue the girl on top of the cliff? You look up there and there's Eric the Blood Slayer. You'll see people dressed like you and cut their hair like you cut your hair. Be fast enough to catch arrows in midair.
It's really the thought behind Fable. Let's get the player into this role-playing game.
Imagine sparking the imaginations of gamers everywhere like that in 2004, and then dropping a game where none of those things happen. It was continued promises like this from Molyneux that eventually led to a lot of mistrust from the community, and there was even backlash after releasing the first Fable because it just didn't have any acorns at all. But still, so many games would adopt so much of its gameplay and design. It was even one of the earlier games to adopt a darker theme and tone to the world.
There's something wrong.
Bandits!
Got one!
Villagers were constantly dying and being turned into monsters. You couldn't always win. And the morality system that ran through its entire world is something else that has gone on to inspire many other games. The only problem with Fable might truly be that it inspired too many other games around it. Games that all slowly got better and better as Fable failed to evolve its gameplay mechanics, its visual style, and stripped away more of its story, heart, and role-playing depth, and the franchise kind of lost its way. Everything we've seen so far about the reboot, though, looks extremely promising. I mean, at least immediately by adopting a cast of UK television heroes, I know we're in safe hands. And with a studio crazily known only for making Forza Horizon from 2012 to 2021, 4 years later, and we're here with Fable, which seems like a really short amount of time, but apparently they started working on it in 2018. That was right after Microsoft bought the studio, and Microsoft are the guys who still have the Fable license from the Lionhead days. And it seems like this decision was made by Phil Spencer.
Please welcome back to the stage, Phil Spencer.
The guy who admitted that committing Lionhead to work on projects like games for the Xbox Kinect was what contributed to the fall of the old Fable series in the first place. So it seems in some ways he's trying to right his wrongs with this reboot. Either way, it's running on the Forza tech engine, which again, I don't know if it's ever been used to make a third-person RPG game, but the visuals from what we've seen so far look absolutely perfect, and it immediately, combined with the music, sparks nostalgia for the original game.
I knew this one hero. I took her in when she had nowhere else to go. Welcome to the most exclusive club in all of Albion.
Which, if you've never played, grab the Anniversary Edition, give it a go. You can play it on your Steam Deck as well. It's still an amazing adventure and one that inspired so many games to follow in its footsteps. But I don't know, maybe you disagree with me, maybe there's a game I've forgotten to point out, maybe there's a missing link that we can all acknowledge. Let me know in the comments down below, guys. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.